Welcome to Part 2C of the CISA series, where we explore one of the most important foundations of information systems auditing, planning and risk-based decision-making. In this section, we will examine how auditors use enterprise risk assessments to understand the organization's most significant business and technology risks. From there, we move into developing the audit universe, the complete population of auditable areas across the enterprise, including systems, applications, infrastructure, vendors, cloud services, and business processes. We then look at strategic audit planning, where audit priorities are aligned to organizational objectives, regulatory requirements, and overall risk exposure. This helps ensure that audit resources are focused on the areas that matter most. Next, we transition into individual engagement planning and audit project management. Here, the auditor defines the scope, objectives, methodology, timelines, resources, and procedures required for a successful audit engagement. Together, these activities form the backbone of a structured, risk-based audit approach that improves assurance, strengthens governance, and supports organizational resilience. This series is designed to provide a structured walkthrough of the complete information systems audit lifecycle, aligned to core CISA concepts and practical auditing activities. We begin in Part 1 with the foundations of IS auditing, including standards, ethics, professional responsibilities, and an overview of the audit lifecycle from planning through reporting and follow-up. In Part 2, we move into governance, the audit function, and understanding the business environment. This establishes how auditors align their work with organizational objectives, governance structures, and operational realities. Part 3 focuses on enterprise risk assessment, development of the audit universe, strategic audit planning, individual engagement planning, and audit project management. Here we explore how risk drives audit priorities and how audits are planned and managed effectively. Part 4 transitions into audit execution and fieldwork, including evidence collection, data analytics, and technology-enabled auditing techniques used during audit activities. In Part 5, we continue deeper into data analytics and audit technology, while also examining how findings are evaluated, validated, and linked to root cause analysis. Finally, Part 6 covers audit reporting, communication with stakeholders, follow-up activities, quality assurance, and continuous improvement of the audit function. Together, these parts provide a complete high-level view of how modern information systems auditing operates in practice, from governance and planning through execution, reporting, and ongoing improvement. In this part of the series, we begin with an introduction to risk-based auditing and why planning is one of the most critical components of an effective information systems audit. We then explore enterprise risk assessment, looking at how organizations identify, evaluate, and prioritize business and technology risks that may impact objectives, operations, compliance, and information security. Next, we examine the control environment and how auditors assess governance structures, internal controls, policies, procedures, and oversight mechanisms designed to manage organizational risk. From there, we move into audit universe development, where all auditable entities, including systems, applications, infrastructure, vendors, cloud services, and business functions, are identified and categorized. We then transition into strategic audit planning, where risk assessments and audit universe information are used to determine long-term audit priorities, audit frequency, and resource allocation. After that, we focus on individual engagement planning, including defining objectives, scope, methodology, timelines, resources, and audit procedures for specific audit engagements. We also bring these concepts together through an integrated audit process flow, showing how understanding the business environment, assessing risk, identifying controls, and planning engagements all connect into a structured audit lifecycle. Finally, we conclude with key CISA points to remember, highlighting the most important concepts, principles, and exam-focused areas related to risk-based audit planning and audit management. Planning is one of the most important success factors in information systems auditing because it establishes the foundation for the entire audit engagement. A well-planned audit ensures the auditor focuses on the areas of greatest business risk and organizational impact, rather than applying resources evenly across all areas regardless of significance. Effective planning helps define clear audit objectives, scope boundaries, timelines, methodologies, and resource requirements. This improves efficiency, reduces duplication of effort, and minimizes the risk of scope creep during the engagement. Pre-audit planning also allows auditors to identify key risks, critical controls, important stakeholders, and applicable regulatory or compliance requirements early in the process. This creates a more focused and structured audit approach. Good planning directly improves the quality, reliability, and relevance of audit evidence collected during fieldwork, while helping ensure the audit is completed within expected timelines and budget constraints. Risk-based planning further supports effective allocation of audit resources by directing attention to the areas that provide the greatest assurance value to the organization. Finally, planning establishes the audit methodology, communication approach, testing procedures, and reporting expectations before fieldwork begins, creating a more controlled and consistent audit process. Understanding the relationship between risk, controls, and assurance is fundamental to information systems auditing and forms the basis of a risk-based audit approach. Risk represents the possibility that business objectives may not be achieved due to threats, vulnerabilities, process failures, or ineffective governance and control activities. To manage this risk, organizations implement controls designed to reduce either the likelihood of a risk event occurring or the impact if the event does occur. These controls may be preventive, detective, corrective, administrative, technical, or operational in nature. When controls are strong and operating effectively, they improve the organization's ability to achieve business objectives securely, reliably, and in compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. Effective controls also support confidentiality, integrity, availability, operational reliability, and overall governance. Assurance is the confidence provided to management and stakeholders that risks are being managed to an acceptable level. Auditors contribute to this assurance by evaluating whether controls are properly designed, implemented, and operating effectively. However, weak or ineffective controls increase residual risk and reduce the level of assurance available to management. This is why auditors use risk assessments to determine which systems, processes, and controls require the greatest audit attention. Ultimately, the goal of auditing is not to eliminate all risk, but to provide reasonable assurance that controls are functioning effectively and that organizational risks are being managed appropriately. This diagram provides a complete high-level overview of the information systems audit process and illustrates how structured, risk-based audit lifecycle delivers assurance, insight, and value to the organization. The process begins with governance and foundation activities, where the audit function is established through audit charters, standards, ethics, independence, and clearly defined roles and responsibilities. This creates the framework that supports effective auditing. The next step focuses on understanding the business environment. Auditors develop an understanding of the organization's objectives, operations, IT environment, governance structures, policies, controls, and compliance obligations. This context is essential for identifying where risk exists. Once the business environment is understood, the auditor performs risk assessment and develops the audit universe. This includes identifying systems, processes, applications, departments, vendors, infrastructure, and other auditable entities, while assessing inherent and residual risks, impact, and control effectiveness. This information then feeds into strategic audit planning, where audits are prioritized based on organizational risk, available resources, regulatory requirements, and management concerns. Multi-year and annual audit plans are developed from this stage. From there, the process moves into individual engagement planning. At this level, auditors define the audit objectives, scope, methodology, procedures, resources, timelines, and communication requirements for a specific audit engagement. The audit then progresses into execution and fieldwork, where evidence is collected through interviews, observation, walkthroughs, inspection, testing, data analytics, and other audit procedures. Auditors evaluate the effectiveness of controls and determine whether risks are being managed appropriately. Following fieldwork, the process transitions into reporting and communication. Audit findings, conclusions, recommendations, and risk impacts are communicated to management and stakeholders to support decision-making and corrective action planning. The final stage is follow-up and continuous improvement, where remediation activities are validated, corrective actions are monitored, and lessons learned are used to strengthen both the control environment and the audit function itself. The diagram also highlights several key enablers of effective auditing, including governance and leadership, risk-based thinking, data analytics, skilled people, standardized processes and tools, and effective communication. Ultimately, the overall outcome of the information systems audit process is to provide assurance, reduce risk, improve governance and performance, support compliance, and enable better organizational decision-making. Understanding the business is the starting point of risk-based auditing. Internal audit first identifies the organization's objectives, processes, technology dependencies, regulatory obligations, and key stakeholders. From there, the audit universe is developed by identifying all auditable areas across the organization, including systems, applications, infrastructure, vendors, cloud services, and business functions. Each area is then assessed based on risk, materiality, control effectiveness, and business impact to determine audit priorities. High-risk and high-impact areas receive greater audit attention and become the focus of the strategic audit plan. The result is a structured, risk-based audit plan that aligns audit resources with organizational objectives and delivers assurance where it matters most. Internal auditors use enterprise risk assessment to understand the organization, identify areas of greatest risk, and build the audit universe that supports risk-based audit planning. The process begins by understanding the business context, objectives, operations, technology, compliance obligations, and external environment. Auditors then identify and analyze risks that could impact the achievement of organizational objectives, considering factors such as likelihood, impact, control effectiveness, and materiality. These risks are translated into the audit universe, which includes auditable entities such as business units, applications, infrastructure, vendors, projects, and compliance areas. The audit universe is then ranked and prioritized so audit resources can focus on the areas of highest risk and greatest business impact. The outcome is a structured, risk-based foundation that improves audit coverage, strengthens governance, and supports strategic audit planning. The audit universe represents everything within the organization that may require audit coverage and assurance. It is developed by identifying all auditable entities across the business, including systems, departments, cloud environments, applications, vendors, data centers, and operational processes. Each component contributes to understanding where risks exist and where controls should be evaluated. By translating organizational risks into auditable areas, internal audit can prioritize reviews based on business impact, risk exposure, and strategic importance. The audit universe then becomes the foundation for risk assessment, strategic audit planning, and the effective allocation of audit resources. This ensures audit efforts remain focused on the areas that matter most to the organization. A risk-based audit approach ensures audit efforts focus on the areas that present the greatest risk to the organization. The process begins by gathering information about the business, understanding the control environment, and assessing risks that could impact organizational objectives. Auditors evaluate both inherent risk and the effectiveness of existing controls to determine where additional audit attention is required. The approach combines compliance testing, substantive testing, analytical procedures, and professional judgment to obtain reliable audit evidence. Risk assessments should be performed continuously, considering changes in technology, threats, regulations, incidents, and business operations. The ultimate goal is to reduce overall audit risk to an acceptable level while providing assurance that controls are operating effectively and organizational risks are being managed appropriately. Understanding risk types and materiality helps IS auditors focus audit attention on the areas that matter most to the organization. The process begins with identifying and assessing risks by understanding the business environment, systems, processes, and potential threats that could impact objectives. Auditors evaluate risks based on factors such as likelihood, impact, significance, and exposure, then prioritize areas requiring deeper audit attention. Materiality determines whether an issue, error, or weakness is significant enough to influence business decisions or organizational objectives. Audit risk is influenced by inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk, which together determine the overall level of assurance required. The goal is to reduce overall audit risk to an acceptable level by focusing audit resources on high-risk and high-impact areas while obtaining sufficient and reliable evidence. Information systems controls help organizations protect assets, manage risk, support operations, and achieve business objectives securely and effectively. Controls are generally categorized as preventive, detective, and corrective controls. Preventive controls aim to stop incidents before they occur. Detective controls identify issues that have already happened, and corrective controls help restore operations and recover from incidents. Auditors evaluate whether controls are properly designed, effectively implemented, and operating consistently within the control environment. The control environment includes governance structures, policies, procedures, management oversight, security practices, and operational processes that support organizational objectives. IS-specific controls may apply to areas such as applications, networks, databases, infrastructure, access management, system development, and business continuity. In risk-based auditing, auditors focus on whether controls reduce risk to an acceptable level and provide reasonable assurance that systems operate securely, reliably, and effectively. Understanding impact, likelihood, tolerance, and appetite is essential for effective risk-based auditing. Impact measures the potential consequences of a risk event, while likelihood reflects the probability of that event occurring. Together, impact and likelihood help determine the overall level of inherent risk facing the organization. Risk tolerance defines the acceptable level of variation from objectives, while risk appetite represents the amount and type of risk the organization is willing to accept in pursuit of its goals. Auditors use these concepts to identify which risks require greater attention, stronger controls, and deeper audit testing. High-impact and high-likelihood risks that exceed organizational tolerance or appetite become priority areas for audit focus and management action. Information systems audits and assessments are performed to evaluate controls, collect evidence, and provide assurance that systems and processes support organizational objectives securely and effectively. Different audit types focus on different objectives and areas of risk. An IS audit evaluates whether information systems are properly protected, reliable, and aligned with business requirements. Compliance audits focus on adherence to laws, regulations, standards, and internal policies, while operational audits assess the effectiveness and efficiency of business processes and controls. Financial and integrated audits combine technology, operational, and financial perspectives to evaluate broader organizational risks and control effectiveness. Specialized audits may include third-party service audits, fraud investigations, forensic reviews, computer forensic audits, and functional audits focused on specific systems or applications. Each audit type provides a different form of assurance, but together they help organizations manage risk, strengthen controls, improve compliance, and support better governance and decision-making. The audit universe identifies all auditable areas across the organization, including business processes, systems, infrastructure, applications, vendors, data assets, and compliance obligations. Once the audit universe is established, each area is evaluated using risk and prioritization factors such as inherent risk, control effectiveness, likelihood, materiality, regulatory exposure, incident history, and strategic importance. These factors help internal audit determine which areas require the greatest level of assurance and audit attention. High-risk and high-impact areas are prioritized for more frequent and detailed audits, while lower-risk areas may be reviewed less often. The outcome is a strategic, risk-based audit plan that defines what will be audited, when audits will occur, the resources required, and the objectives of each engagement. This ensures audit activities remain aligned with organizational goals, risk exposure, and available resources while delivering the greatest value to the business. This example shows how a risk-based information systems audit plan is structured and managed across the audit period. The plan begins with a risk assessment summary that identifies high, medium, and low-risk areas across the organization, helping internal audit prioritize where assurance is needed most. Based on these priorities, planned audits are scheduled with defined objectives, timelines, estimated effort, and audit types such as compliance or operational reviews. The audit plan also considers available resources, skills, budget, training requirements, and communication activities needed to support successful execution. Monitoring and reporting activities help track progress against the plan, identify emerging risks, and ensure audit priorities remain aligned with organizational objectives. The overall goal is to provide structured, risk-based assurance that information systems and technology processes remain secure, reliable, compliant, and effective. Strategic audit planning provides the overall direction for the internal audit function, but individual engagement planning transforms that strategy into practical audit execution. This is where high-level audit priorities become focused, structured, and actionable engagements. The process begins with the strategic audit plan, which outlines the organization's major risk areas, audit priorities, resource allocation, and multi-year audit objectives. This plan ensures audit activities remain aligned with business goals, risk appetite, and governance expectations. From there, the audit team selects a specific engagement based on factors such as risk level, regulatory requirements, timing, dependencies, available resources, and management concerns. Higher risk areas are generally prioritized because they have the greatest potential impact on the organization. Once the engagement is selected, the audit focus is defined. This includes establishing preliminary objectives, identifying key risks, determining initial scope boundaries, and identifying the stakeholders who need to be involved throughout the audit process. The next step is to develop the individual engagement plan. This is the detailed blueprint for the audit and includes the audit scope, objectives, risk assessment approach, methodology, testing procedures, timelines, communication plans, required resources, and reporting expectations. A well-developed engagement plan ensures the audit team understands exactly what will be audited, how it will be audited, and what evidence will be required. Finally, the engagement is formally approved and authorized by the appropriate stakeholders, such as audit leadership, management, compliance, or legal representatives where required. This approval confirms that the audit can proceed with clear authority, agreed expectations, and organizational support. Effective audit engagement and planning provide the foundation for a successful audit. Before testing begins, the auditor must clearly understand what will be audited, why it is being audited, and how the audit will be performed. The process starts with defining the audit subject, objectives, and scope. This helps identify the systems, processes, locations, and risks that will be included in the review, while ensuring the audit remains focused and aligned to organizational objectives. The auditor then identifies the resources needed for the engagement, including skills, tools, documentation, timelines, and stakeholder involvement. During audit planning, additional risk assessments, interviews, and background reviews are performed to refine the audit approach and finalize the audit strategy. The auditor also develops the audit procedures, testing methods, and evidence collection approach that will be used during fieldwork. The result is a structured audit program that defines the scope, objectives, procedures, timelines, and reporting expectations for the engagement. The key takeaway is that strong planning improves audit quality, ensures efficient use of resources, and helps focus audit efforts on the areas of highest risk and greatest business impact. An audit engagement letter formally communicates the purpose, scope, and expectations of the audit to management and key stakeholders. It helps ensure everyone understands what will be audited, how the audit will be performed, and what support is required. The engagement letter typically defines the audit objectives, scope, standards, methodology, timelines, and reporting approach. It also outlines roles and responsibilities, access to information and personnel, confidentiality expectations, and any audit limitations or resource arrangements. In addition, the letter clarifies that the audit provides reasonable assurance rather than absolute assurance, and it normally includes formal acceptance and approval by both internal audit and management. The key purpose of the engagement letter is to establish clear expectations, support communication, and provide formal authorization for the audit engagement to proceed. This example brings the entire risk-based audit lifecycle together and shows how internal audit moves from understanding organizational risk to delivering assurance and business value. The process begins with enterprise risk assessment. In this scenario, the organization is concerned about increasing cyber attacks, ransomware, privacy regulations, and operational disruption within a retail and e-commerce environment. Internal audit performs a risk assessment to identify and evaluate risks based on likelihood, impact, and existing controls. At this stage, auditors consider factors such as business objectives, technology dependencies, threats, vulnerabilities, regulatory obligations, prior incidents, financial exposure, and reputational impact. The output is a prioritized list of risks, such as data breaches, ransomware attacks, third-party vendor risks, operational downtime, and privacy compliance failures. These risks are normally categorized as high, medium, or low based on their potential business impact. The next step is audit universe development. Here, internal audit identifies everything within the organization that could potentially be audited. This includes business processes, applications, infrastructure, cloud services, vendors, data centers, departments, projects, and information assets. The audit universe becomes the foundation for strategic planning because it provides a complete picture of all auditable entities across the organization. Each area is then linked back to risk ratings so auditors can determine which areas require more attention. The process then moves into strategic audit planning. Using the risk-ranked audit universe, internal audit develops a multi-year strategic audit plan and an annual audit plan. Audit priorities are selected based on organizational goals, regulatory requirements, management concerns, available resources, timing, and prior audit results. In this example, high-priority audit areas include cybersecurity, data protection, third-party risk management, cloud security, application controls, and business continuity. These areas are prioritized because they represent the highest risk exposure to the organization. After the strategic plan is approved, internal audit moves into individual engagement planning. A specific audit engagement is selected, in this case, an access management audit. At this stage, the audit team defines detailed objectives, scope, criteria, methodology, resources, timelines, and communication plans. The objective of the engagement is to evaluate whether access to systems and data is properly controlled and monitored. The audit scope includes user provisioning, privileged access management, deprovisioning, and role reviews. The audit criteria may include company security policies, ISO 27001 requirements, industry standards, and regulatory expectations. The methodology defines how evidence will be collected. This could include interviews, observations, inspection of documentation, system reviews, data analytics, and re-performance testing. The engagement plan also identifies key risks such as orphan accounts, excessive privileges, weak access controls, and lack of periodic reviews. The output is a fully approved engagement plan with defined procedures, timelines, testing activities, and reporting expectations. The final stage is audit project management and execution. The audit is now performed as a managed project to ensure quality, consistency, and timely delivery. The audit team performs testing procedures, collects evidence, monitors progress, manages issues, and communicates findings to management. Project management activities include tracking milestones, handling scope changes, managing risks, and coordinating stakeholder communication throughout the engagement. The outputs of this phase include audit findings, root cause analysis, recommendations, management action plans, and the final audit report. In this example, a potential finding could involve orphan user accounts with excessive privileges that may allow unauthorized access to customer information. Management would then be expected to implement corrective actions, and internal audit would later perform follow-up activities to confirm that the risks were properly addressed. The key takeaway from this entire scenario is that risk drives the audit process from beginning to end. Enterprise risk assessment identifies what matters most. The audit universe defines what can be audited. Strategic planning determines what should be audited first. Engagement planning defines how the audit will be performed. And audit execution delivers assurance, strengthens controls, supports compliance, and helps the organization achieve its objectives more effectively. These are some of the most important concepts to remember for the CISA exam when studying enterprise risk assessment, audit universe development, strategic audit planning, individual engagement planning, and audit project management. First, risk assessment is the foundation of risk-based auditing. Auditors focus on the areas with the highest business risk and greatest organizational impact. Risk is commonly evaluated using likelihood, impact, materiality, and control effectiveness. You should also remember the different types of audit risk. Inherent risk exists naturally before controls are applied. Control risk exists when controls fail to prevent or detect issues. Detection risk is the risk that the auditor does not identify a problem during the audit. Overall audit risk is influenced by all of these together. The audit universe is another key concept. It represents the complete list of auditable entities within the organization, including business processes, systems, applications, infrastructure, cloud services, vendors, data centers, projects, departments, and information assets. The audit universe forms the basis for strategic audit planning. Strategic audit planning is risk-based and determines what will be audited, when it will be audited, and why it should be audited. Strategic plans are usually multi-year plans, while annual audit plans are derived from those strategies. High-risk areas are audited more frequently and receive deeper audit attention. Individual engagement planning converts strategic goals into a specific audit engagement. Every engagement should clearly define objectives, scope, criteria, methodology, resources, timelines, and communication requirements. Poorly defined scope is a common audit weakness and can lead to inefficiency and ineffective audit results. Audit project management is also important in the CISA exam. Audits should be managed like projects with clear planning, execution, monitoring, reporting, and follow-up activities. Audit managers must monitor progress, delays, scope creep, dependencies, resource issues, and communication throughout the engagement. Another key area is audit evidence. Evidence must be sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful to support audit conclusions. Auditors may gather evidence through inquiry, observation, inspection, analytical procedures, reperformance, and data analysis techniques. You should also remember that findings normally include the condition, criteria, cause, effect, and recommendation. After the audit is completed, follow-up activities are performed to confirm that corrective actions were properly implemented. Risk treatment options are another common exam topic. Organizations may mitigate risk, accept risk, avoid risk, or transfer share risk depending on business objectives and risk appetite. These are some final CISA exam reminders that tie the entire audit life cycle together and reinforce the key concepts auditors are expected to understand. One of the most important principles is that risk drives audit planning. Auditors should always focus their efforts on the areas with the greatest potential impact to the organization. The audit universe then supports strategic planning by identifying everything that could potentially be audited, including systems, processes, applications, infrastructure, vendors, and business functions. Strategic audit plans use this information to prioritize audit activities based on organizational risk and business objectives. Strategic plans then drive engagement selection. Higher risk areas are usually audited more frequently and in greater depth than lower risk areas. Once an engagement is selected, engagement planning drives audit execution. A well-defined scope, clear objectives, appropriate resources, and structured procedures are critical for an effective audit. Another important reminder is that controls reduce risk, but they rarely eliminate it completely. Auditors should therefore focus on evaluating control effectiveness and identifying any remaining residual risk. Materiality is also a key concept in auditing. It helps determine the significance of issues and whether findings could influence business decisions or organizational objectives. High-risk areas generally require deeper testing, more evidence collection, and stronger audit focus because failures in these areas could have significant operational, financial, regulatory, or reputational impact. Independence and objectivity are essential throughout the audit lifecycle. Auditors must remain unbiased and avoid conflicts of interest in order to provide reliable assurance. Audit evidence must always support audit conclusions. Evidence should be sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful to justify findings and recommendations. Finally, communication with stakeholders is critical at every stage of the audit process, from planning and fieldwork to reporting and follow-up. Strong communication helps ensure alignment, cooperation, and successful remediation of identified issues. In the next part of the series, we move from audit planning into audit execution and fieldwork, the stage where auditors begin performing testing, collecting evidence, and evaluating controls in practice. We will cover how auditors gather reliable and relevant evidence through interviews, observation, inspection, analytical procedures, and re-performance testing. We will also explore how data analytics is increasingly used to identify anomalies, trends, exceptions, and high-risk transactions more efficiently. Finally, we will look at technology-enabled auditing, including the use of automated tools, continuous monitoring techniques, and modern audit technologies that improve audit coverage, accuracy, and efficiency. This next section focuses on how audits are actually performed in the real world and how auditors convert planning into meaningful assurance and audit results. Before we close, just a quick disclaimer. The content shared in this series is based on practical experience, research, and professional interpretation of information systems auditing concepts, risk management practices, and governance principles. This material is intended for educational and knowledge-sharing purposes to support learning, discussion, and exam preparation. I am not officially affiliated with an organization or any certification body, and viewers should always refer to official standards, frameworks, guidance, and study materials where appropriate. Thank you for watching and supporting the series. If you found this useful, please like, share, subscribe, and follow the series for upcoming parts covering audit execution, evidence collection, data analytics, reporting, and technology-enabled auditing. I appreciate the support, and I look forward to continuing the journey through the CISA domains together.